Terrance Washington, CEO of Skylink Technologies, sits in his office overlooking Manhattan. His phone shows 173 grounded planes across major airports nationwide. 3 simple taps on his tablet accomplish this. Flashback to 24 hours earlier, a flight attendant refusing him entry to first class despite his ticket. Before we dive into this incredible story, where are you watching from today? If you're enjoying content like this, hit that like button and subscribe to stay updated on more powerful stories of resilience and justice. Now let's see how one man's expertise transformed humiliation into accountability. Terrance Washington was no stranger to challenges. At 38, the self-made tech genius had built Skylink Technologies from nothing into an aviation communication powerhouse. His journey began far from the gleaming skyscrapers of Manhattan in the tough neighborhoods of Southside Chicago. Raised by a single mother who worked 3 jobs to keep food on the table, Terrance found escape in technology. While other kids played basketball after school, 10-year-old Terrance salvaged discarded computers from neighborhood dumpsters. By 12, he was repairing computers for local businesses, charging just enough to help with groceries. His mother, Evelyn Washington, often found him asleep at their kitchen table, surrounded by circuit boards and computer manuals. "Computers make sense," he once told his exhausted mother. "They don't care what color you are or where you live. They just respond to what you tell them." His extraordinary talent didn't go unnoticed. His high school computer science teacher, Mr. Harris, recognized potential that transcended their underfunded public school. With Mr. Harris's guidance, Terrance applied for a full scholarship to Massachusetts Institute of Technology, submitting a revolutionary network security protocol he designed in his bedroom. MIT wasn't just a new school, it was a new world. Among the predominantly wealthy white student body, Terrance stood out. He worked twice as hard, slept half as much, and graduated with highest honors in computer science and electrical engineering. But the real world proved that talent and credentials weren't always enough. At his first job with a major tech corporation, Terrance repeatedly watched less qualified colleagues receive promotions while he remained stagnant. His innovations were often attributed to team efforts or credited to supervisors. During his 3 years there, he filed patents for security systems that earned the company millions, while his salary barely covered his student loan payments. "It's nothing personal," his manager explained during one particularly painful performance review. "You're just not leadership material. Some people are better behind the scenes." Those words catalyzed Terrance's decision to leave. In his small apartment with savings that would last 6 months at best, Terrance coded day and night. He developed a revolutionary aviation communication system that addressed critical security vulnerabilities in existing technology. He called it Skylink. The early days of Skylink Technologies were lean. Terrance pitched to over 50 potential investors, facing rejection after rejection. Many questioned whether airlines would trust critical systems to a startup, especially one led by a young black man with no aviation background. But Terrance persisted, refining his pitch, demonstrating his expertise, and leveraging his growing network of MIT connections. His breakthrough came when former classmate David Chen, now working for a venture capital firm, convinced his bosses to take a meeting. After a 4-hour technical demonstration that left seasoned aviation experts speechless, Skylink secured its first million in funding. What followed was 8 years of relentless innovation, strategic expansion, and proven results. Skylink grew from a one-man operation in a rented office space to a workforce of over 200 employees occupying 3 floors in a Manhattan high-rise. The company's valuation reached $1.2 billion last quarter, placing Terrance among the rare black tech founders to achieve unicorn status. His most recent triumph was securing negotiations with United Global Airlines, UGA, the country's second-largest carrier. If finalized, the $300 million contract would implement Skylink's breakthrough security protocol across their entire fleet, setting new industry standards and potentially positioning the company for an IPO. Despite his success, Terrance never forgot where he came from. He established scholarship programs for minority students interested in technology, mentored young black tech professionals, and regularly spoke at inner-city schools. His company maintained one of the most diverse workforces in the tech industry, with hiring practices specifically designed to identify overlooked talent. Success means nothing if you pull the ladder up behind you, he often told new employees during orientation. As Terrance packed his briefcase for his flight to Dallas, where he would meet with UGA executives to finalize contract details, he reviewed the presentation one last time. Everything had to be perfect. This wasn't just a business deal. It was a validation of everything he'd built and fought for. Little did he know, the journey to Dallas would become far more consequential than he could have imagined. LaGuardia Airport buzzed with the usual Monday morning business travel chaos. Terrance navigated the terminal with practiced efficiency, his carry-on gliding smoothly behind him. He wore a tailored navy suit, a crisp white shirt, and a subtle gold tie pin, the only personal adornment he permitted himself in professional settings. His Skylink Technologies ID hung from a lanyard tucked discreetly into his breast pocket, accessible but not ostentatious. The first hints of what awaited him appeared at the security checkpoint. While white executives in similar attire breezed through with cursory glances from TSA agents, Terrance received additional scrutiny. "Step aside, sir," the agent said, pulling Terrance's laptop bag for random screening. This was nothing new. Terrance mentally calculated that approximately 70% of his business trips involved these random checks. He maintained his composure through the additional security procedures, checking his watch as valuable minutes ticked away. Finally cleared, he headed toward his gate, where boarding for United Global Airlines Flight 1227 to Dallas had already begun. "Now boarding our first class and premium customers," the gate agent announced as Terrance approached. He joined the line with 3 other passengers, all white men in business attire. The gate agent nodded to each as they passed, scanning tickets without comment. When Terrance presented his first-class boarding pass, flight attendant Jessica Reed's smile faltered. "Are you sure you're in the right line?" she asked, her tone dripping with suspicion. "Yes," Terrance replied calmly, gesturing to his boarding pass. "First-class seat 2A." Jessica examined his ticket with exaggerated thoroughness, flipping it over as if searching for a counterfeit marking. The business travelers behind Terrance shifted impatiently. "This is the first-class boarding line," she emphasized, louder than necessary. "Economy will board in about 20 minutes. Several nearby passengers glanced over, witnessing Terrance's mounting humiliation. "I understand," he replied, his voice level despite the growing knot in his stomach. "I'm a Premier 1K member with over 15,000 miles this year. I always book first class for business travel." Jessica's eyes narrowed. She signaled to her supervisor, a balding man with a perpetual frown. "Ryan, can you come here for a moment?" Ryan Hartwell approached with an air of authority, barely acknowledging Terrance, as Jessica whispered something to him. "Is there a problem, sir?" Ryan asked, positioning himself between Terrance and the jet bridge entrance. "Not from my perspective," Terrance answered. "I'm simply trying to board with my first-class ticket." "May I see some identification?" Ryan demanded, extending his hand. Terrance provided his driver's license along with his boarding pass. Behind him, other first-class passengers continued boarding without similar requests, their tickets receiving only cursory glances. "And how did you acquire this ticket?" Ryan pressed, comparing the name on the ID to the boarding pass with unwarranted suspicion. The implication was unmistakable. Terrance felt heat rising in his neck, but maintained his professional demeanor. "I booked it through my company's travel portal, as I do every week." "And what company might that be?" Ryan continued his tone, suggesting no legitimate answer would satisfy him. "Skylink Technologies. I'm the CEO." Terrance reached for his company ID, though he shouldn't have needed it just to board a plane with a valid ticket. A few feet away, Jessica whispered to another flight attendant, not quite quietly enough. "These people always trying to upgrade. Like we wouldn't notice." The second attendant snickered, glancing dismissively at Terrance. Ryan examined Terrance's company ID with the same scrutiny as his other credentials. "I'll need to verify this. Please step aside while other passengers board." The businessmen behind Terrance now moved forward, receiving smiles and welcome aboard greetings from both Jessica and Ryan. Not one was asked for additional identification. For 10 excruciating minutes, Terrance stood to the side as Ryan made a show of calling the airline's verification department. Passengers filing past cast curious or pitying glances. Some avoided eye contact altogether. Terrance maintained perfect posture, his expression neutral despite the public humiliation burning through him. Finally, Ryan returned with Terrance's documents. "Everything appears to be in order," he admitted without apology. "You may board now." As Terrance reclaimed his ID and boarding pass, Ryan added in a lower voice, "Just so you know, first-class passengers typically dress more appropriately for the cabin." Terrance glanced down at his impeccable suit, identical in quality and style to those worn by the white executives who had boarded without incident. "I'll keep that in mind," he replied, the words tasting bitter as he finally stepped onto the jet bridge. Dignity intact, but spirit bruised in a way that was all too familiar. Terrance settled into seat 2, a spacious leather, first-class accommodation by the window. His jaw remained tight as he methodically arranged his belongings, laptop in the side compartment, phone in airplane mode, briefcase tucked neatly beneath the seat in front of him. His movements were precise, controlled, a physical manifestation of the emotional regulation he'd mastered through years of similar experiences. In the aisle seat next to him, a middle-aged white man in a gray suit glanced up from his newspaper, offering a perfunctory nod before returning to the business section. The man wore a UGA-branded tie clip, United Global Airlines, but Terrance was too preoccupied to notice this detail yet. Flight attendant Jessica Reed moved through the first-class cabin, offering pre-departure beverages with practiced hospitality. Sparkling water, orange juice, champagne. Her smile returned for every passenger except when she reached Terrance's row. "Drink?" she asked, curtly addressing the window between Terrance and the outside world, rather than making eye contact. "Water, please," Terrance replied. Jessica served his seatmate first, placing a napkin down with care before setting a crystal glass of sparkling water on his tray table. For Terrance, she simply handed over a plastic cup, nearly sloshing water onto his suit as she practically dropped it into his hand without a napkin. The contrast wasn't lost on his seatmate, who frowned slightly at the interaction. "Excuse me," the man said to Jessica before she could move away. "I believe my colleague here asked for water as well." Jessica flushed. "Of course. I'll bring a proper glass right away." "No need," Terrance said, his voice calm despite the burning in his chest. "This is fine." As Jessica retreated, the man extended his hand. "Kenneth Barrett. I don't believe we've met before, though. If you're headed to Dallas on a Monday morning, I assume you're in the industry." Terrance accepted the handshake, noting the firm grip and the man's direct gaze. "Terrance Washington." "First time flying United Global?" Kenneth asked, making conversation as the final passengers boarded. "No," Terrance replied, his tone neutral. "I fly this route at least twice monthly." Kenneth nodded, sensing Terrance's reticence. An uncomfortable silence settled between them as the safety demonstration began. Terrance turned his attention to the window, watching ground crew scurry about with luggage carts. Throughout the flight, the disparity in service remained glaring. When meal service began, Jessica served every other first-class passenger before reluctantly attending to Terrance. His request for coffee went forgotten until Kenneth flagged down another flight attendant. The hot towel service somehow skipped his seat entirely. Midway through the flight, Terrance opened his laptop and began reviewing slides for his upcoming presentation. The proprietary Skylink interface glowed on his screen, complex schematics and code visible as he refined details of the system architecture. Kenneth, returning from the lavatory, caught a glimpse of the screen. He paused, recognition flickering across his face. "Is that Skylink's Neural Adaptive Security Protocol?" he asked, his voice lowered as he settled back into his seat. Terrance instinctively angled the screen away, years of intellectual property protection kicking in. You're familiar with our systems. I should be, Kenneth replied, extending his business card. Kenneth Barrett, Vice President of Operations, United Global Airlines. The card confirmed what the UGA tie clip had suggested. Terrance found himself face to face with one of the key decision-makers for the contract he was flying to Dallas to finalize. Terrance Washington, he responded, offering his own card, CEO, Skylink Technologies. Kenneth's expression shifted from professional interest to embarrassment as realization dawned. You're our 10 o'clock meeting. That's correct. I've read all your white papers on adaptive security protocols. Your work on quantum-resistant encryption is revolutionary. Kenneth's tone had completely transformed admiration, replacing the earlier polite disinterest. Thank you, Terrance, acknowledged his response measured. The whiplash of being treated with suspicion one moment and respect the next was all too familiar. Kenneth lowered his voice. I have to apologize for what happened during boarding. That was completely unacceptable. It happens more often than you might think, Terrance replied, the understatement hanging between them. Not at UGA it shouldn't, Kenneth insisted. We pride ourselves on customer service, especially for our premium passengers and business partners. Terrance allowed a small, knowing smile. With all due respect, Mr. Barrett, what you witnessed is the reality for many black professionals, regardless of their status. The uniform of success, suits credentials, achievements, doesn't shield us from these experiences. Kenneth felt silent discomfort evident on his face. The remainder of the flight proceeded with Kenneth making obvious efforts to engage Terrance in industry conversation. They discussed the upcoming contract aviation security challenges and technological innovations, with Kenneth displaying genuine interest in Terrance's expertise. When Jessica returned to collect trash before landing, she noticed the business cards exchanged between the men. Her eyes widened slightly at Terrance's title, her subsequent service becoming awkwardly overzealous, a transparent correction that only highlighted the previous discrimination. As the plane began its descent into Dallas, Kenneth leaned over. I want you to know I'll be addressing what happened today with our customer service department. I appreciate that, Terrance replied, packing his laptop away. But individual corrections, while necessary, don't address systemic issues. Kenneth nodded slowly. You're right, and I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on how UGA might improve in that regard. Perhaps we can discuss that at the meeting, Terrance suggested, as the landing gear deployed with a mechanical groan. After all, the systems we're implementing aren't just about technology. They're about creating reliable, consistent protocols that don't fail because of human bias. The plane touched down in Dallas, the jolt of tires meeting tarmac, punctuating Terrance's point. As passengers prepared to disembark, the power dynamic had shifted in ways neither man had anticipated at takeoff. The contract negotiation now carried dimensions beyond technical specifications and price points, a reality Terrance had navigated his entire career. The gleaming customer service desk at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport stood in stark contrast to the dull experience Terrance was about to endure. Kenneth Barrett had disembarked ahead of him with a firm handshake and assurances they would meet at headquarters in 2 hours. Now alone, Terrance approached the premium customer service counter, determined to file a formal complaint before proceeding to his hotel. Behind the counter, customer service representative Allison Palmer greeted him with a practiced smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Her blonde hair was pulled into a tight bun, her blue United Global Airlines uniform pressed to perfection. "How may I assist you today?" she asked, her gaze already drifting past him to the white businessman waiting behind. "I'd like to file a formal complaint about discriminatory treatment I received on my flight from New York," Terrance stated, placing his boarding pass on the counter. Allison's smile tightened. "I'm sorry to hear you had an unsatisfactory experience. What seems to be the issue?" Terrance recounted the boarding incident and subsequent treatment during the flight, providing specific details, times, and names. As he spoke, Allison's expression shifted from professional concern to subtle dismissal. "These things happen during busy flights," she offered when he finished. "I'm sure there was a misunderstanding with the verification process. Our staff must follow security protocols." The misunderstanding seemed to apply exclusively to me, Terrance countered, while other first-class passengers boarded without additional verification. Allison tapped at her keyboard, ostensibly entering his complaint. Everyone's experience feels personal to them. I'll make a note of your concerns. I'd like to speak with a manager, Terrance requested, recognizing the brush-off for what it was. Our regional manager is currently in a meeting. I can ask him to call you later if you'd like to leave a number. I'll wait, Terrance replied, checking his watch. He had time before his meeting at UGA headquarters. Allison's smile faltered. It could be quite a while. That's fine. 45 minutes later, after Allison had helped 17 other customers, while Terrance stood patiently to the side, Regional Manager Douglas Freeman finally emerged from a back office. A portly man with thinning red hair and an air of perpetual irritation, Douglas approached with reluctance evident in every step. Mr. Washington, I understand you have some concerns about your flight experience today. They moved to a small consultation area with 2 chairs and a small table. Douglas listened to Terrance's account with the practiced neutral expression of someone who had heard it all before and believed very little of it. While I understand your frustration, Douglas began once Terrance finished, our flight attendants are trained to verify passenger credentials when something seems out of place. And what exactly seemed out of place about me? Terrance asked, his tone level despite the implication. Douglas shifted uncomfortably. I'm not suggesting anything specific. Perhaps you misinterpreted their standard verification process. We check credentials for various reasons, security flags, system glitches. Terrance reached for his phone. I recorded portions of the interaction. This wasn't strictly true, he hadn't recorded the boarding incident, but the bluff had its intended effect. Douglas's expression shifted from dismissive to concerned. That won't be necessary, he said quickly. At United Global, we take all customer complaints seriously, especially from our premium members. Especially when those complaints might involve documented evidence of discrimination, Terrance suggested. Douglas cleared his throat. I wouldn't characterize the situation that way, but clearly your experience wasn't up to our standards. We'd like to offer you compensation in the form of flight vouchers. I'm not interested in vouchers, Terrance interrupted. I want accountability. What specific actions will be taken regarding the staff involved? What systemic changes will prevent this from happening to other passengers who look like me? Douglas's response was predictable, vague assurances about looking into it and promises of additional employee training. Nothing concrete, nothing measurable, nothing that would create actual change. We'll certainly address this with the employees in question, Douglas concluded. Now, if there's nothing else, I can have Allison process those vouchers for you. Terrance stood buttoning his suit jacket. No vouchers. Please ensure my formal complaint is properly documented in your system. My contact information is on file if you need to reach me regarding the outcome of your investigation. As he walked away, his phone buzzed with a calendar notification. UGA Headquarters, Contract Finalization, 1000 a.m. The irony wasn't lost on him. He was about to enter negotiations with a company whose staff had just demonstrated precisely why systemic changes were so necessary. What would you do if you were in Terrance's position? Would you proceed with the contract negotiation or walk away from a company that treated you this way? Comment number 1 if you think he should continue with the meeting and secure this important deal despite the discrimination. Comment number 2 if you believe he should cancel the meeting and find a more respectful business partner. Don't forget to hit that like button if you're enjoying this real-life business drama unfolding, and subscribe to follow Terrance's next move. Now let's see how he handles this pivotal meeting with the same company that just showed their true colors. United Global Airlines headquarters occupied a sleek glass tower in downtown Dallas, its 48 stories crowned with the company's distinctive winged logo. Terrance arrived 30 minutes early, navigating the marble-floored lobby to a private elevator that whisked him to the executive floor. The receptionist, a young woman with a warm smile, greeted him professionally. Good morning, Mr. Washington. The team is expecting you in the Azure boardroom. May I offer you coffee while you wait? This standard courtesy, unremarkable in normal circumstances, struck Terrance as almost jarring after his earlier treatment. Black coffee, thank you, he replied, settling into a leather chair in the waiting area. At precisely 9:55 a.m., Kenneth Barrett emerged from a hallway, extending his hand with noticeably more enthusiasm than during their first meeting on the plane. "Terrance, glad you made it. Everyone's eager to finalize this partnership," Kenneth said, leading him down a corridor lined with photographs of UGA aircraft through the decades. The Azure boardroom lived up to its name, a vast space with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the Dallas skyline. A polished table accommodated 20 leather chairs currently occupied by 12 UGA executives. Technical equipment for presentations lined one wall, while another displayed real-time flight tracking of the company's global operations. At the head of the table stood William Brennan, CEO of United Global Airlines. Tall and commanding with silver hair and the confident posture of someone accustomed to authority, Brennan approached with a broad smile. "Mr. Washington, a pleasure to finally meet the genius behind Skylink," Brennan said, shaking Terrance's hand firmly. "Your reputation precedes you." Introductions circled the room. VPs of technology security, customer experience, and finance, along with their respective team members. Terrance noted their polished appearances and the subtle hierarchy revealed through seating arrangements. "We're excited to implement your neural adaptive security protocol across our fleet," Brennan continued as everyone settled into their places. "Kenneth tells me it's revolutionary." "We believe it is," Terrance replied, connecting his laptop to the presentation system. "If you're ready, I'd like to walk you through the specific implementations and benefits." For the next 45 minutes, Terrance commanded the room with expertise and precision. He demonstrated how Skylink's system would integrate with UGA's existing technology, explaining complex security concepts in accessible terms. He showed simulations of potential security breaches and how the system would adapt in real time to neutralize threats. "The key innovation is our self-learning algorithm," Terrance explained, displaying a complex flowchart. "Traditional security systems rely on known threat signatures. Ours anticipates vulnerabilities before they're exploited." Questions came from around the table, each displaying the executive team's enthusiasm for the technology. The VP of Security seemed particularly impressed by the multi-layered authentication protocols. The finance team nodded approvingly at the projected operational cost savings. Throughout the presentation, Terrance noticed Kenneth's unusual silence. The VP of Operations, who had shown genuine interest on the flight, now seemed distracted, occasionally exchanging glances with Brennan that Terrance couldn't interpret. "Before we discuss implementation timelines," Brennan said as the presentation concluded, "let's take 15 minutes. Coffee's available in the adjoining room." As the executives filed out, Brennan placed a hand on Kenneth's shoulder, guiding him to a corner of the empty boardroom. Their conversation, though hushed, appeared intense. Kenneth gestured emphatically, while Brennan maintained a stern expression. Terrance observed this exchange while pretending to review notes on his tablet. Years of navigating corporate politics had sharpened his ability to read unspoken dynamics. Something had changed since the morning, and he suspected it involved more than just technical considerations. When the meeting reconvened, the atmosphere had subtly shifted. Brennan's enthusiasm seemed more measured, his questions more probing. "While your system is impressive," Brennan began, "our technical team has raised some last-minute concerns about integration complexity." This was news to Terrance. "We've completed successful integrations with 3 other major airlines, all with infrastructure similar to UGA's. The preliminary testing phase we conducted with your team last month showed no compatibility issues." "Yes, well," Brennan continued, "we've also received an interesting proposal from AeroGuard Systems that we feel obligated to consider." AeroGuard was Skylink's main competitor, a larger, older company with inferior technology but deeper industry connections. Their system had been demonstrably outperformed by Skylink's in every independent evaluation. "We understand you're eager to finalize today," Brennan added, "but the board feels we need additional time to review both options. Perhaps we could reconvene next week." The pivot was as transparent as it was unexpected. Something had happened between Terrance's arrival at the airport and this meeting. something that had changed the trajectory of a deal that had been all but finalized. Kenneth avoided eye contact, suddenly fascinated by the documents before him. The other executives showed various degrees of confusion at this apparent change in direction. Of course, Terrance replied smoothly, betraying none of the calculations racing through his mind. Due diligence is essential for a decision of this magnitude. As the meeting concluded with vague promises of circling back soon, Terrance methodically packed his presentation materials. The $300 million contract that had seemed certain was now mysteriously in jeopardy. In the elevator descending to the lobby, Kenneth finally broke his awkward silence. "Terrance, about the delay." "No explanation necessary." Terrance interrupted his tone, professional but cool. "Companies change direction all the time. Though it is curious that AeroGuard's inferior system is suddenly a contender after months of negotiations and successful testing with Skylink." Kenneth flushed. "It's not that simple. There are considerations beyond technical specifications." "Indeed," Terrance replied as the elevator doors opened to the lobby. "There always are." As they parted ways, Terrance maintained his composed exterior while his mind raced with strategic calculations. The timing was too perfect to be coincidental. His treatment on the flight, the dismissive response to his complaint, and now this sudden contractual hesitation, they formed a pattern too clear to ignore. What remained unclear was how to respond. As he stepped into the Texas sunshine, Terrance Washington, the boy from Southside Chicago who had built a tech empire through brilliance and persistence, began to formulate a plan that would transform this setback into the most important lesson United Global Airlines would ever learn. The Highland Hotel's presidential suite offered Terrance both luxury and privacy, two necessities for what would prove to be one of the most consequential evenings of his career. Floor-to-ceiling windows presented a glittering view of the Dallas skyline, lights blinking on as dusk settled over the city. Among those distant buildings stood UGA headquarters, its illuminated logo visible even from this distance. Terrance loosened his tie and poured himself 2 fingers of Macallan 18, a rare indulgence he allowed himself in moments of strategic contemplation. The amber liquid caught the light as he swirled it gently, considering the day's events with the methodical analysis that had made him a technological pioneer. His phone vibrated on the marble countertop. Aaliyah Johnson, Skylink's VP of Operations, and Terrance's most trusted colleague, was calling from New York. "How did it go?" she asked, when he answered her voice, carrying the crisp efficiency that complemented his more measured approach to leadership. "Not as expected," Terrance replied, summarizing the meeting's surprising conclusion. "They're considering AeroGuard. After all the testing we've done, Aaliyah's disbelief was palpable through the phone. Their system failed 3 critical penetration tests in industry reviews last quarter." "It's not about technology," Terrance said, moving to the window. "Something changed today." He recounted the airport incident in detail, the discriminatory treatment during boarding, the disparity in service, and the dismissive response to his complaint. "The timing is suspect," Aaliyah agreed. "Barrett witnessed everything on the flight." "Front row seat," Terrance confirmed. He seemed genuinely embarrassed by it, but something happened between our arrival and the meeting. "My guess is he reported the incident to Brennan, who decided a CEO willing to file discrimination complaints might be difficult to work with." Silence hung between them for a moment as Aaliyah processed this. At 41, she had navigated her own path through the tech industry's prejudices as a black woman with 2 engineering degrees from Stanford. She understood the unspoken dynamics at play. "So we're losing a $300 million contract because you had the audacity to expect basic human dignity." The controlled anger in her voice mirrored his own feelings. "That's my read," Terrance said. "But here's what they don't realize. They've already integrated our preliminary systems during the testing phase." This was the critical fact that had been formulating in Terrance's mind since leaving the meeting. United Global had already implemented Skylink's communication infrastructure across 60% of their fleet during the 3-month testing period. Full implementation would have added the neural security layer, but the foundational architecture was already operational in 173 UGA aircraft. The three-tap protocol, Aaliyah said, slowly recognition dawning in her voice. Terrance nodded, though she couldn't see him. Exactly. The three-tap protocol was a security feature Terrance had personally coded into the system, a backdoor that would allow authorized personnel to initiate an emergency security lockdown if necessary. 3 specific commands entered in sequence would activate a diagnostic mode that would ground affected aircraft until security verification was completed. It was designed as a safety measure, Terrance reminded her. If a security breach was detected, we could temporarily ground planes rather than risk compromised systems mid-flight. Are you considering what I think you're considering? Aaliyah asked, her tone a mixture of concern and intrigue. Terrance took a measured sip of scotch. I'm considering demonstrating the critical importance of our system to UGA's operations. By activating the protocol, there was a pause. Terrance, that would ground over half their domestic fleet. For approximately 6 hours, he confirmed. The diagnostic cycle is thorough. That's, bold Aaliyah said carefully. There are considerable risks. I'm aware. Terrance had already begun calculating them, potential legal repercussions, industry backlash, media scrutiny. But the protocol is technically part of the testing phase they agreed to. There's nothing illegal about running a comprehensive diagnostic on our own system. The timing would make your point rather clear, Aaliyah noted. Sometimes, clarity is necessary when subtle approaches fail. They discussed the technical details for several minutes, how the protocol would function, what systems would be affected, and most importantly, how to ensure passenger safety was never compromised. This isn't just about the contract anymore, is it? Aaliyah asked finally. Terrance considered the question. No, he admitted. It's about accountability. About demonstrating that discrimination has consequences beyond moral failing. It affects business operations, reputation, bottom line. The board might have concerns, Aaliyah pointed out. I'll handle the board, Terrance assured her. This remains within my executive authority as a testing procedure. After they disconnected, Terrance stood at the window for a long time, watching aircraft taking off and landing at DFW Airport in the distance. The ethical considerations weighed heavily on him. Was he crossing a line? Using technical leverage to address a personal slight? No, he decided finally. This wasn't personal vindictiveness, it was a necessary business lesson. Companies changed behavior when it affected their finances, not when it wounded someone's dignity. UGA needed to understand that discriminating against a black CEO had practical consequences beyond bad publicity. Returning to his laptop, Terrance accessed Skylink's secure development portal, authenticating through 3 layers of biometric verification. He navigated to the testing suite for UGA's implementation, finding the diagnostic protocols exactly where he'd designed them. For a moment, his finger hovered over the keyboard. Once initiated, the process couldn't be easily reversed. It would run its full diagnostic cycle, testing every security parameter of the system. With calm determination, Terrance entered the 3 commands that would demonstrate exactly why discrimination was not just morally wrong, but profoundly bad business. The system acknowledged his authority protocols activated, and across the country, 173 United Global Airlines planes prepared to receive instructions that would keep them firmly on the ground until Skylink and Terrance Washington decided otherwise. At 5:43 a.m. Central Time, as dawn broke over Dallas, the first alerts began triggering in United Global Airlines' operational headquarters. Terrance Washington, already showered and dressed in a fresh charcoal suit, watched the cascade of events unfold on his tablet from his hotel suite, a cup of black coffee cooling beside him. The Skylink diagnostic protocol initiated precisely as designed. One by one, communication systems across 173 UGA aircraft pinged the central servers with an authentication request, triggering the security verification sequence. Within 17 minutes, every affected plane had received the mandatory ground hold notification standard procedure when communication systems required verification. At O'Hare International Airport in Chicago, Flight 2187 to Los Angeles was first to experience the effect. Passengers already seated for the 6:00 a.m. departure watched as the aircraft's lights flickered momentarily. In the cockpit, Captain Sarah Rodriguez frowned at her suddenly unresponsive communications panel. United 2187 Ground Control. We're showing a system alert on your aircraft. Please hold position and verify, came the controller's voice. Roger that, ground. Confirming system alert. Initiating verification protocols. Rodriguez responded following procedure for what she assumed was a minor glitch. Similar scenarios played out simultaneously across the country. At Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson, 6 United Global planes scheduled for early morning departures remained at their gates. In Denver, a fully boarded 787 Dreamliner bound for Frankfurt returned to the terminal. At LaGuardia, where Terrance's journey had begun, 4 UGA aircraft sat immobilized on the tarmac. By 6:30 a.m., UGA's emergency response team had fully activated. The pattern was unmistakable. Only United Global flights were affected, and only those running the Skylink communication architecture implemented during the testing phase. In UGA's Dallas headquarters, William Brennan arrived to chaos. The operations center, typically a model of efficiency, now resembled a war room. Screens displayed red warning indicators across the fleet map. Phones rang incessantly as airport managers, crew supervisors, and increasingly frustrated passengers demanded explanations. "Someone tell me what the hell is happening," Brennan shouted as he entered, his typical composed demeanor shattered by the crisis. Patricia Winters, Director of Flight Operations, approached with a tablet displaying real-time updates. "We have 173 aircraft grounded across 37 airports. All affected planes are showing communication security verification protocols engaged." "Override it," Brennan demanded. "We've tried," Patricia replied. "The system is running a comprehensive diagnostic cycle. Our tech team can't bypass it without potentially compromising critical safety systems." "How long?" "Minimum 6 hours per aircraft once the diagnostic initiates." "They're all in different stages of the cycle." Brennan's face reddened. "That's over 1,000 flights affected. Do we know what triggered this?" Kenneth Barrett, who had been coordinating with technical teams since the first alert, approached hesitantly. "Sir, all affected aircraft are running the Skylink communication infrastructure." A moment of silence fell across the operations center as the implication registered. Brennan's expression transformed from confusion to realization to fury in rapid succession. "Washington," he muttered. "Get him on the phone. Now." As this drama unfolded, Terrance calmly reviewed real-time data on his tablet. The diagnostic was functioning flawlessly, methodically testing every security parameter within the system. No safety functions were compromised. In fact, they were being verified more thoroughly than standard procedures required. His phone rang at 6:47 a.m. The caller ID displayed United Global Airlines. "Washington speaking." He answered, his tone neutral. "This is William Brennan." The UGA CEO's voice vibrated with barely contained rage. "What the hell have you done to our aircraft?" "Good morning, Mr. Brennan," Terrance replied calmly. "I understand you're experiencing some system diagnostics today." "Cut the bullshit. You've sabotaged our fleet." "On the contrary," Terrance countered, "I've initiated a comprehensive security verification protocol, a standard part of the testing phase your company agreed to." The protocol was documented in Section 7.3 of our implementation agreement. A pause followed as Brennan presumably confirmed this information with someone in the room. "You deliberately activated this protocol," Brennan accused, "after we delayed finalizing the contract." "The timing is interesting, isn't it?" Terrance allowed. "Much like the timing of your sudden interest in an inferior competitor immediately after I experienced discriminatory treatment on your airline." Brennan's breathing was audible through the phone. "Do you have any idea the damage you're causing? We have thousands of stranded passengers. We're losing millions by the hour." "I imagine it's quite disruptive," Terrance agreed. "Discrimination usually is disruptive to those experiencing it, though the costs aren't always so immediately quantifiable." The connection went silent for several seconds before Brennan spoke again, his voice lower, more controlled. "What do you want?" I believe we should continue our discussion in person, Terrance suggested. I can be at your headquarters in 30 minutes. Make it 15, Brennan snapped before ending the call. Meanwhile, across the country, the ripple effects intensified. Morning news programs began reporting on the mysterious UGA technical difficulties. Social media filled with posts from stranded passengers. The company's stock price, which had opened at $68.27, dropped to $64.05 within the first hour of trading as investors reacted to the operational crisis. In UGA's investor relations department, phones rang continuously as analysts and major shareholders demanded explanations. The company's preliminary statement about routine system verification procedures satisfied no one. At 7:30 a.m., Terrance Washington entered United Global Airlines headquarters for the second time in 24 hours. Unlike his previous visit, no one offered him coffee. The receptionist, recognizing him immediately, hurriedly directed him to the executive elevator without the usual pleasantries. The Azure boardroom, so carefully arranged for yesterday's presentation, now resembled a command center. Laptops and tablets cluttered the polished table. Executives spoke urgently into phones or huddled in tense conversations. William Brennan stood at the head of the table tie, loosened face, flushed with a combination of anger and exhaustion. As Terrance entered, a hush fell over the room. All eyes turned to the man who, with 3 simple taps, had brought a major airline to its knees. "Let's talk," Brennan said, gesturing to a chair beside him. The power dynamic had shifted dramatically since their last meeting. Both men knew it. Terrance took his seat, opened his tablet, and placed it on the table, the Skylink diagnostic interface visible to everyone present. A single button labeled Override Authentication Protocol glowed green on the screen. "I believe," Terrance said calmly, "we have some matters to reconsider." The Azure boardroom, so named for its blue-tinted windows that gave the Dallas skyline an ethereal quality, now felt more like the eye of a hurricane. A dozen UGA executives surrounded the conference table, their faces displaying varying degrees of panic, anger, and resignation. The real-time flight tracking wall that usually showed a complex dance of aircraft now displayed a troubling number of stationary icons. William Brennan remained standing at the head of the table, his imposing frame rigid with tension. "You've made your point, Washington. Now fix our planes." Terrance settled comfortably into his chair, adjusting his cuffs with deliberate slowness. "I haven't begun to make my point, Mr. Brennan. But I'm prepared to discuss resolution." Kenneth Barrett, seated across the table, looked physically ill. The VP of Operations understood better than anyone the catastrophic impact of 173 grounded aircraft, the cascading cancellations, crew, displacements, and logistical nightmare that would affect operations for days. "This is corporate sabotage," snapped Eliza Hamilton, UGA's chief legal officer. "We'll pursue every available legal remedy." "Is it sabotage to test a security system during an explicitly agreed-upon testing phase?" Terrance countered his voice, maintaining its professional calm. "Section 7.3 of our implementation agreement specifically outlines diagnostic protocols. I'm simply being thorough before our partnership concludes or continues." Hamilton opened her mouth to argue but was silenced by Brennan's raised hand. "What do you want?" Brennan demanded, dispensing with corporate niceties. Terrance leaned forward slightly. "First, I want acknowledgement of what actually happened here. Yesterday morning, I was publicly humiliated and discriminated against by your staff. When I filed a formal complaint, your customer service manager offered platitudes instead of accountability. Hours later, a nearly finalized $300 million contract was suddenly in jeopardy. Are these events connected, Mr. Brennan?" The room fell silent. Kenneth Barrett's gaze dropped to the table. "We don't discriminate at United Global," Brennan insisted, though his convictions seemed to falter. If there was an incident, it was an isolated case of poor judgment by individual employees. Isolated? Terrance raised an eyebrow. "Your own data would suggest otherwise." Last year, UGA received 63 formal complaints of discriminatory treatment from black first-class passengers, nearly triple the industry average. Those are just the passengers who took the time to file reports. Several executives exchanged surprised glances. This information hadn't been widely circulated internally. "How did you?" Kenneth began. "Public information available through DOT filings," Terrance explained. Skylink performs thorough due diligence on potential partners. Patricia Winters, the director of flight operations, checked her tablet and nodded grimly to Brennan, confirming Terrance's statistics. "That's unfortunate," Brennan conceded. "But what does it have to do with our contract negotiations or this system shutdown?" "Everything," Terrance replied. "When companies treat discrimination as a PR problem rather than a fundamental business failure, they miss something critical. Bias isn't just morally wrong, it's operationally devastating. Right now, you're experiencing just a fraction of that cost." He gestured toward his tablet where the diagnostic interface showed the verification progress across the fleet. "Each grounded plane costs you approximately $27,000 per hour in direct expenses, not counting reputation damage and future booking losses. The current situation will cost UGA about $28 million today alone." The VP of Finance winced visibly at these figures. "This is extortion," Hamilton interjected. "This is education," Terrance corrected. "And considerably less expensive than the class action discrimination lawsuit your company might eventually face without systemic changes." Brennan's composure finally cracked. "Enough games. What will it take to get our planes back in the air?" Terrance placed both hands flat on the table. "4 things. First, Jessica Reed and Ryan Hartwell are terminated immediately for discriminatory conduct. Not reassigned, not retrained, terminated." Brennan nodded curtly. "Second, United Global implements mandatory anti-discrimination training across all customer-facing staff with quarterly assessment and compliance reporting." "That's already in our long-term plans," Kenneth offered. Third, Terrance continued, UGA issues a public statement acknowledging this incident and committing to specific measurable diversity initiatives, including hiring targets at management levels. Brennan's jaw tightened, but he nodded again. Finally, our original contract proceeds as negotiated, with no further delays or mysterious competitors suddenly entering consideration. The tension in the room was palpable as Brennan considered these demands. The executives waited, watching their CEO's internal calculation play out across his face: pride versus practicality, indignation versus financial reality. The company lawyer leaned over to whisper something in Brennan's ear. He nodded grimly before addressing Terrance. Brennan's Palin had a story. Brennan's Palin, every descendants. He some tells in Terrance. He some things in Pravati sevens, and a story 2 minutes. Manans Palins, every descendants, every descendants, every descendants. And if we agree to these terms, you'll end this diagnostic immediately. The moment documents reflecting these agreements are signed, Terrance confirmed. Brennan hesitated only briefly before gesturing to his assistant. Draft the termination notices and contract revisions immediately. For the next 45 minutes, documents circulated around the table. Employment terminations were processed, contract language finalized, and public statements drafted. Throughout this flurry of activity, Terrance remained composed, reviewing each document with meticulous attention. When the final signature was applied to the revised contract, Terrance entered the override command on his tablet. Across the country, Skylink systems began returning to normal operations. The verification had been genuine. Each aircraft would be certified as secure before resuming service, but the process was now accelerated. Planes will begin returning to service within 30 minutes, Terrance announced. Full operations should resume within 3 hours. Brennan's relief was visible despite his lingering anger. I hope you realize, Washington, that while we're proceeding with this contract, our relationship has been fundamentally altered by your tactics today. I agree completely, Terrance replied, standing to gather his materials. It's now a relationship where discrimination has tangible consequences beyond moral disapproval. That's progress. As the meeting concluded, Kenneth Barrett approached Terrance by the elevator. The UGA executive looked simultaneously impressed and unsettled. "That was extraordinary leverage," Kenneth admitted quietly. "I've never seen anything like it." "Technology creates new forms of accountability," Terrance replied. "But this could have been avoided entirely with something much simpler." "What's that?" "Basic human dignity," Terrance said as the elevator doors opened. "It costs nothing and prevents everything that happened today." As Terrance descended to the lobby, his phone buzzed with a news alert. United Global Airlines faces massive system outage, stock drops 7%. The real work transforming this moment of leverage into lasting change was just beginning. But for the first time since his humiliating experience the previous day, Terrance Washington smiled. Sometimes justice required more than patience and perseverance. Sometimes it required 3 perfectly timed taps. 1 month later, Terrance Washington stood in his corner office on the 42nd floor of Skylink Tower in Manhattan. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, though his attention was fixed on the large screen mounted on the wall. CNBC was running a feature on United Global Airlines' newly announced diversity initiatives. In an unprecedented move, the financial analyst reported UGA has committed $50 million to diversity recruitment and training programs over the next 5 years. CEO William Brennan calls it an investment in operational excellence through inclusive practices. This follows last month's system-wide outage that temporarily grounded nearly 200 aircraft. The screen showed Brennan at a press conference looking humbled but determined. United Global Airlines is committed to leading the industry, not just in technical innovation, but in creating an environment where every passenger and employee is treated with respect and dignity. The incident last month revealed vulnerabilities in both our technical systems and our company culture. We're addressing both aggressively. Terrance muted the television as Aaliyah Johnson entered his office carrying a tablet and a knowing smile. UGA stock has fully recovered, she reported, up 2 points since they announced the diversity initiative. Turns out investors like companies that address systemic problems instead of hiding them. "Imagine that," Terrance replied, gesturing for her to take a seat. On his desk lay a formal letter from William Brennan, a personal apology for Terrance's experience on UGA Flight 1227. Next to it sat the final signed contract for Skylink's complete security protocol implementation across United Global's entire fleet, now valued at $340 million after expanded scope. Implementation is proceeding ahead of schedule. Aaliyah continued reviewing the project metrics on her tablet. Their technical team is surprisingly cooperative now. "Nothing motivates like a demonstration of vulnerability," Terrance observed. Speaking of which, Aaliyah slid a news clipping across the desk. Jessica Reed and Ryan Hartwell have filed wrongful termination suits. UGA's legal team seems unworried. Apparently, the video evidence you bluffed about actually exists. Airport security footage captured the entire boarding incident. Terrance allowed himself a small smile. Sometimes the universe provides. His intercom buzzed. "Mr. Washington, Kenneth Barrett from UGA is here for your meeting. Send him in." Kenneth entered looking markedly different from their last encounter. Gone was the corporate stiffness. He moved with the energy of someone passionate about his work. After the system shutdown incident, Kenneth had surprised everyone by volunteering to head UGA's new Diversity and Inclusion Department, transitioning from operations. "Terrance, good to see you," Kenneth greeted him with genuine warmth. "Kenneth, how's the new role treating you?" "Eye-opening," Kenneth admitted, settling into a chair. "I've spent 20 years in aviation thinking I understood the business. Now I realize I was seeing only part of the operation. The data on how discrimination impacts everything from employee retention to customer loyalty is staggering." "That's why we're meeting today," Terrance replied, pulling up a presentation on his tablet. The mentorship program. Together they reviewed the framework for a joint initiative between Skylink and UGA, a comprehensive mentorship and internship program for minority students in aviation technology. The program would provide scholarships, hands-on training, and guaranteed interviews for graduates. The first cohort will start next semester, Kenneth confirmed. We've already received over 300 applications. As they finalized details, Terrance reflected on the complex emotions of the past month. The satisfaction of seeing accountability enforced was tempered by disappointment that such dramatic measures had been necessary. The validation of the contract was shadowed by the familiar knowledge that, as a Black executive, his competence alone had not been enough to ensure respect. "I have to ask," Kenneth said after they concluded the business portion of their meeting. "Do you regret it? Using the system leverage that way?" Terrance considered the question carefully. "I regret that it was necessary. In an ideal world, demonstrating excellence would be sufficient. But we don't live in that world yet." For what it's worth, Kenneth offered, "You've changed UGA more in a month than I could have in 20 years of committee meetings and sensitivity training." "Systems respond to different incentives," Terrance replied. "People respond to human connection and moral arguments. Corporations respond to operational and financial consequences." As their meeting concluded, Kenneth mentioned casually, "I'm flying Skylink back to Dallas this afternoon. Your system's performing flawlessly, by the way." Terrance smiled. "Glad to hear it." Later that evening, Terrance found himself at LaGuardia Airport, once again boarding a United Global flight to Chicago for a speaking engagement. The experience could not have been more different from a month earlier. The gate agent greeted him with genuine respect. The first-class boarding process proceeded smoothly. Most notably, a new flight attendant, a young Black woman named Michelle Daniels, welcomed him aboard with a warm smile and authentic professionalism. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Washington. It's an honor to have you flying with us. Can I offer you a pre-departure beverage?" As Terrance settled into his seat, he felt the small victory of normalcy, of receiving the same service any first-class passenger should expect. It wasn't revolution. It was simply equity. Yet achieving even this basic standard had required extraordinary measures. Opening his laptop, he reviewed his latest project, 3 new system improvements to the Skylink architecture that would make aviation communication even more secure. The screen displayed elegant code sequences, the product of his continuing innovation. The irony wasn't lost on him. The same expertise that had made him a target of discrimination had also given him the leverage to demand change. Technology, like power, was neutral, its impact determined by the hands that wielded it and the purposes it served. As the aircraft prepared for takeoff, Terrance glanced at the Skylink logo discreetly displayed on the in-flight entertainment system. 3 months ago, it had been merely a corporate symbol. Now it represented something more, a reminder that in a world where justice sometimes faltered, expertise could become its own form of accountability. The plane accelerated down the runway, lifting into the evening sky over New York City. Terrance Washington, the boy from Southside Chicago, who had refused to accept the limitations others tried to impose, watched the lights of the city recede below, each one a testament to human ingenuity and potential qualities that existed in abundance across all communities, waiting only for the chance to shine. This powerful story demonstrates that true justice sometimes requires more than patience and perseverance. Terrance Washington's experience reveals how discrimination persists even at the highest levels of success, showing that Black excellence alone isn't always enough to guarantee equal treatment. The narrative illustrates how systemic racism operates, from frontline employees to corporate decision-makers who protect discriminatory practices through silence or denial. The story also highlights the strategic use of leverage. When traditional complaints failed, Terrance used his unique position and technical expertise to force accountability. While not everyone has access to such power, the principle remains. Finding creative ways to make discrimination costly is sometimes the only path to meaningful change. Perhaps most importantly, this story shows that addressing racism isn't just morally right, it's good business. UGA ultimately benefited from confronting their discrimination problem, improving their culture, stock value, and public image. The transformation demonstrates how diversity initiatives, when implemented, sincerely strengthen organizations rather than burden them. What similar stories of discrimination have you experienced or witnessed? Would you have handled the situation differently if you were in Terrance's position? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If this story of resilience in the different down, the face of discrimination resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful racism stories that inspire change. Share this video with someone who needs to understand how discrimination operates in corporate America and the creative ways people fight back. Thank you for watching, and remember that sometimes creating change requires using the very expertise others try to dismiss.